What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. The 2023 regular season is now over. Yes, it is over. It flew by, of course. These will be the final ranking projections that I do, unless I do a projection Saturday night after the games. If it's not obvious who's going to be in the top four, I might do that. We'll see what happens this weekend. It seems like we're not really going to get any upsets, any chaos. The top 8 teams they've moved a little bit, but we've had the same teams in the top 8 since the very first playoff rankings. It was just been a very quiet November in terms of the playoff picture and at the top. And of course, some great games, some big games. Ohio State, Michigan, being a game of 2 teams in that top 8. But it was really we just didn't get any chaos, and we'll see if that happens this weekend. But again, these are the final projections of the at least end of the regular season here, and we're going to jump right in. And if you watch the channel this season, I appreciate it. If you watch my projections, and you guys can tell me, have you seen any other projections out there that have been more accurate than mine? If you have, I'd love to see them. I feel like we've done a really good job. No, they haven't been perfect, but I think we've done a pretty good job of projecting these rankings each week. And I feel like they'll be pretty accurate again this week, but do have some question marks. And really, the first question mark is number 25. I don't know who's going to be at number 25. I'm going to put Toledo up there. They've only got 1 loss. That was in the very first week of the season. Kansas State, maybe they don't drop them all the way out of the rankings. Maybe Utah makes their way back into the rankings. Maybe SMU with 2 losses. I think maybe Toledo gets in there, and if Tulane loses, if Liberty loses, maybe Toledo could go to a group of 5, or be that group of 5 team to go to a New Year's Six Bowl. If SMU is in there at 25, then that means basically the American champion is in. If Liberty loses, Tulane, though, controls their own destiny to get to that New Year's Six Bowl if they can beat SMU on Saturday. Liberty kind of surprised me last week getting into the rankings. I did not project that. I think they move up to 24 this week. They are 12-0. They should be ranked, and I said that last week. They should be ranked. I didn't think the committee would do it, but yeah, they should be ranked. Clemson at number 23. They move up a little bit. Tulane a little bit. Tennessee at number 21. Really, 21 through 24, I feel very confident. Again, 25, I don't know who's going to be there. I'm just going to guess Toledo. That'll be interesting to see if it is Toledo, and we get 3 group of 5 teams in these rankings. All right, now let's move on to 16 through 20. So Oregon State at 20, Tennessee at 21. Those 2 teams are very close. Really, neither one of them have had any great wins. Oregon State beat Utah. They probably won't be ranked this week. Tennessee has one over Texas A&M. They won't be ranked. They both have 4 losses, so maybe those 2 teams are a little bit overrated in terms of resume, but the committee obviously thinks they're good teams. I think Oregon State is just ahead of Tennessee after losing to a really good and really hot Oregon team. NC State up to number 19, really an underrated team. This team's 9-3. They've had a pretty good season, and they've got a win over a ranked Clemson team. I think they continue to move up the rankings. They put a beat down on North Carolina this past weekend. Really impressive win there. Oklahoma State up to 18. Notre Dame up to 17. I think Iowa is at number 16 at 10-2. It's Iowa. Would you really take Iowa over Notre Dame, over Oklahoma State, over NC State, over Oregon State? I don't know that I would, but getting through the Power 5, getting through the Big Ten with just 2 losses, I think it's fair to rank them here at number 16. But again, if we're talking about trying to get the best teams and rank the teams, I don't know if Iowa definitely necessarily deserves to be ranked number 16, but based off how good they are, how good of a team this is, but resume-wise, getting through, again, with just 2 losses, we'll see what they can do against Michigan, see if they can compete in that game. That will be interesting. Let's go now to 11 through 15. I don't think Louisville drops too much. They've still got the win over Notre Dame. That's a nice win for them. And they lost in a rivalry game, in a close game, so I think they do take a bit of a drop, but not too far. I think they have a better resume than Iowa, no doubt about it, and so I think they should be ranked ahead of Iowa, and I think they will be. Both of those teams with 2 losses. Then you have Arizona and LSU. Committee views these 2 teams as the best 3-loss teams. No reason to think anything different after this past weekend. Oklahoma at number 12, Ole Miss at number 11. Those teams kind of staying in the same order that they were in last week. And then we get to the top 10, and just ahead of them, clearly going to be Penn State, Missouri at 9. Really, that's where you feel the most confident. Those teams, those 2 lost teams there, that little cluster. Just no reason for anything to change with those teams. And I don't think anything changes with 6 through 8. And the big question is going to be, how far does Ohio State fall? And I'll show you where I think they're going to be in just a second. I don't think they're going to fall behind Oregon. They have a much better resume than Oregon. They lost on the road, rivalry game, close game, just like Oregon lost in a very close rivalry game against Washington. So you look at that, and both teams lost the top 5 teams. They're pretty even, so I think you have to go to the resume. Ohio State has the better resume. I think that they will be ahead of Oregon, but I do think that Oregon controls their own destiny, and I think if they win out, they're going to be fine. They're going to jump Ohio State and, of course, pass Washington. So Oregon is in great shape, even though I think they're still going to be at 6 this week. I think they control their own destiny. And I'm actually on my playoff eliminator video tomorrow, which there's not going to be any eliminations. We'll go ahead and give that away. But I'm going to break down the playoff paths for each team and how each team in the top 8 can get into the college football playoff. So be watching for that. But Texas still ahead of Alabama. Alabama, the crazy Iron Bowl finish going on the road there. I don't think the committee's going to really penalize them. They're not going to drop them below Missouri or anything like that. But that's not enough to jump Texas, who was dominant this past weekend. So I still think Alabama has a very hard time getting ahead of Texas, even if they beat Georgia. And again, we'll talk about that later. But yeah, those 3 teams I think will be in the same order. The only question mark is Oregon. Do they potentially get ahead of Ohio State? I don't think that they will, unless the committee just thinks, look, this team's playing really, really good football. We think they're a better team than Ohio State. But Ohio State does still have the better resume. They've got that top 10 win over Penn State. And then also a win over Notre Dame in there as well. So let's go to the top 5 now. And here it is. So this is how I think it's going to look. Georgia, Michigan, Washington, Florida State, and Ohio State. I don't think Ohio State drops a ton. I think they do drop behind the undefeated teams. But remember, when we had all those undefeated teams, Ohio State was the top undefeated team. I think they now will be the top 1-loss team. And I'm talking about before Georgia jumped ahead of them. Again, Ohio State, Oregon, look at the resumes. Ohio State has the better resume. But it wouldn't shock me if Oregon was ahead of Ohio State. Wouldn't shock me. Again, the committee seems to really like Oregon. Now, Florida State, beating Florida, that was a really good one. Florida State was more impressive than Washington, really. I mean, Washington was at home. Florida State was on the road. Florida State played arguably a better team. Well, I guess Washington State and Florida are pretty even. But, yeah, there's no reason to think Florida State's going to jump Washington, though, based off of last week. And I still believe that Florida State is, even without Jordan Travis, they win on Saturday, they're going to be in. And really, that's the case with the top 4 teams. If they win, they're going to be in. I think if Oregon wins, they're in. I think those 5 teams control their destiny. And then we'll break down the playoff path for the other teams, again, in that video tomorrow. I think Ohio State is still alive, and I'll talk about exactly how they can get in. But yeah, no real reason to expect a change here at the top besides Ohio State dropping. How far do they drop? Could they even potentially stay ahead of Florida State? That would not shock me, even though I think if Florida State wins on Saturday they would jump back ahead. But that's what I think the rankings are going to look like. Give me your thoughts and your projections down in the comments below.